Well, good morning, YouTube. Guys, today's video ended up not being what I wanted it to be, and you'll see that in a moment. I'm installing a new power system in Goliath so that we can run off of battery more often than we were running before and run the whole house. And we're not going to get into a lot. In part of that, I had to do some preparations on Goliath in one of the compartments in order to mount the equipment. So when I started recording, I was recording to not lose that footage with the intent of starting a video later on, explaining what we're doing, installing the electronics, and this was just gonna be a brief part. But it turned into a project. It turned into way more of a project than I expected it to be. And as I'm sitting here at 11:30 at night editing the video, I realized I never did an intro. So this is your intro. So now let's get to the project that wasn't supposed to be. All right, guys, so originally this compartment down here was designed to hold the propane bottles. So we could hold 6 of the 20-pound, which are approximately 4.7 gallons of propane. 4 of them were hooked up all the time, and the other 2 were just there as backups. This piece down here, it was in there for the bases to sit in, and then that kept the bottles from moving around, and then they clamped from the top with a typical bottle holder. Now this piece here was actually welded in, so I had to cut it out because I'm not going to be using that many propane bottles, if I use any at all. I'm also going to take out this old battery tray. Now this was actually on slides, kind of like a drawer. However, it is just so rusted and nasty that I can't get it to operate. I even used the hammer to try to tap it out and ended up breaking it. So we're just going to eliminate it because I don't use it anyways. I just been kind of like throwing crap in here, or storage, like extra power cords, hoses, the gas cans for the generator, and so on and so forth. But we're going to try to change things where I don't need that stuff as much with this new power system. So I've got a few hours into pulling all this out and getting all this loose bulk rust out of here, and it's just been a mess. It's been absolutely awful. Once I get that, there it goes. Once I get that drawer piece out of there, I'm gonna have to grind that down as well. But take a look at the rust pile that's underneath. I don't know how well the camera picked that up, but those piles of rust are 4 to 4.5 inches tall. It's a lot of rust. Scraped it out by hand first, and then hit it with a grinder. Then when we get it all cleaned up, we're gonna go ahead and treat the metal and paint it just so this area stays a little bit cleaner inside. See how nasty and rusty and all the junk collected underneath there? Well guys, as you can see, that took a lot of work, but everything's out of there, everything's ground down. That track system with that tray in it, the way they had welded it in there, they did it piece by piece. So they welded in the little 1-inch square tubing as feet on the bottom, and then they welded brackets up on top of that, and then they welded the actual tracks in. So I couldn't get to the welds on the bottom to take the whole thing out without cutting it up into pieces, and then had to grind down all those welds, grind the floor. And as you can see, there are still a lot of pits in the floor. It looks absolutely terrible. However, that is 3/16 steel. It's still very, very solid. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna treat it and then paint it, and hopefully that will prevent it from getting too much worse off anytime in the near future. First thing I'm gonna do now is use this Loctite Naval Jelly Rust Dissolver. Talon used some of this when he was working on something in the shop the other day, and he said it worked really, really well. I haven't used it in years and years and years, but we're gonna give it a try, see if we can't melt down some of that extra little bit of rust that's there. This also kind of helps convert, and it turns like thin surfaces of rust into an actual usable primer. That way we don't have too much of an issue with the paint that we're gonna put on there adhering. All right, guys, the instructions say to leave that on there for 5 to 10 minutes and then rinse with fresh, clean water. Repeat if necessary. Now I put it on pretty heavy. As you guys saw, I used the entire bottle on there, so I'm gonna let it sit. It says you can leave it sit longer for heavily rusted areas. I would definitely consider that a heavily rusted area. So I'm gonna let it sit on there for a little while I do some cleanup. I might even grab some lunch or something, but I've got a big mess over here to clean up. And then I need to move Goliath over closer to the building so that I have the hose accessible when it comes time to rinse it out. All right, guys, so it's been sitting for a little bit over an hour. I got all my mess cleaned up and I got Goliath moved over to another spot. That way I'm closer to the hose outlet right there. So you can see the stuff's been working. You can see where the heavily rusted areas are turning black. You can see some of the white in there, which is that phosphoric acid doing its job and converting that rust. So now we're gonna start rinsing it out. Okay guys, I got it all hosed out. And another thing that I did, I went ahead and drilled some sizable holes in the 4 corners of the box because as I was hosing it, there was a lot of water that was kind of retaining in there. And that was part of the problem. This box isn't 100% sealed. Now the stuff that I put in here primarily stays dry, but a little bit of water will seep past the seals and it was just standing in the floor. And that's what was causing all the rust down low. You notice the sidewalls aren't that bad. So with those 4 holes drilled, and they're just shy of 3/4 of an inch, probably 11/16 or so, that should help allow any standing water from sitting in there. And the way that the lower rack for the propane bottles was sitting in there with all the holes cut in it, it was about 1 inch off of the bottom of the floor. And it made it impossible to clean underneath there, to get anything out there. So it was just holding so much moisture. Every time the dirt, the debris, the loose rust that was under there got wet, it just stayed wet. So this way, most of it will drain. Like I said, it's not a sealed compartment anyways. There's already holes in the bottom of it for the propane to be able to vent out if for some reason it were to have a leak in there. As you can see right now, I've got a fan going in there. I've dried it out with a towel. I hit it with the blower to get all the little puddles out of the small crevices in there. And now with this fan in here, we're gonna get it completely dry so we can put our first coat of primer on it and get that going. All right, guys, so as soon as that's done drying, the first thing we're gonna put on it is Rust-Oleum, Rusty Metal Primer. It says use on heavily rusted metals for the ultimate finish. So we're gonna put a good heavy coat on that. Keep in mind, we are not looking for the ultimate finish. It's pitted down here. Let's face it, this is never gonna look pretty. We're just trying to protect it from rusting. In fact, it looks like Deadpool's face. It's never gonna be nice. Well, guys, I know it is not a picture perfect, absolute custom repair, but I think we've done a pretty good job on it. Real quick, while I was waiting on that primer coat to dry, which it didn't dry as long as it should have, but I went ahead and pulled out another spot. So here in the next cabinet over is where the generator is. And this little spot down here is where the fuel tank went, or the generator. Then up here is where the batteries went. Now, this is a slide out tray. What was down here was a slide out tray as well. As you can see right there, I just pulled it out while I was waiting for the primer to dry before I painted the black paint. You can see it's got rust holes all through it. It's pretty thin and flimsy. It was garbage anyways. But I thought I would take the moment, because I haven't cleaned in here yet. All I did is cut that tray out, remove the batteries, remove the fuel tank as well. So I'm going to show you the rust and garbage buildup that is back in there that was just like this other cabinet. I know it's kind of dark in there, but look guys, you can see the pile of trash and rust Now, I don't think the camera's doing it justice, but that's a pile of rust in the corner. Here's what the whole floor looks like. So we're eventually gonna have to do the same thing over here. So yeah, reading the directions on that Rust-Oleum primer, it says not to top coat until completely dry, which is usually within 24 hours. Now, I gave it about 3 hours, but I did put a fan on it and it was dry to the touch. It was dry to handle. No, probably not fully cured, but don't have a lot of time to let it sit and dry for 24 hours and then put the black on and have to let it dry for 24 hours before I can do anything else. I was pretty set on getting this second coat on there, the black coat, I should say, before I went home this evening. It's getting pretty late and we'll be heading home here pretty soon. Now, when I started this video, I had every intention on going over this whole inverter install, the current solar system that's on Goliath and how the batteries and everything were configured, the changes that I'm making to make it more useful for us. And I ended up going way more in depth with this cleaning up these bays, and that's a problem that I have. Sometimes I am just way too OCD about things, and cleaning all of this up, none of it was necessary to do the installation I needed to do. But I did have to pull some stuff out of there. And then in my head, I saw all that rust. I'm like, oh, we got to stop this. I don't want to put electrics in here, blah, blah. You guys know how that works. So I end up doing 10 other projects in order to prep for one project. And that's just the way I work. And I know it's not exactly always ideal. And that's one of the reasons it takes me so long to get stuff done. So anyway, I brought you guys along with this, even though I had no intention of going this in depth on this kind of cabinet or storage box restoration, whatever you want to call this. But you guys can kind of see what I was going for. So the solar / inverter stuff, that's gonna have to be the next video. So for now, I'm gonna go ahead and call this one quits. I wanna thank you guys for watching, and please share the video. I'm trying to get as many shares and likes as we possibly can. And until the next time I see you, keep those engines running. All right, also guys, just as another note before I head out, the back wall, basically tomorrow I'm going to cut out a piece of 1/2-inch plywood and probably cover it with some indoor-outdoor carpet, and it will get attached up there on the back wall and give me a good place to screw down a lot of the components that we're going to be installing in here. That's why I didn't paint all the way up, because it wasn't really rusty up there. It's dirty, but it's all going to get covered up anyways. Hopefully tomorrow morning we'll get that wood cut and covered and be able to get it installed in here. That way we can start doing our inverter installation.